Okay, artificial intelligence. Um, I remember as a kid reading a lot of science fiction. The Moon is a Harsh Mistress, and other books about technologies that were walking the razor's edge of good and bad. So, for those of you out there in the world, I mean, artificial intelligence is something that we've been talking about for a lot of years, kind of on the edges. But it just then sort of came out of nowhere. Like literally, it was you're talking about this thing that is over the horizon, but suddenly it was like boom, here it is, and it's chat gpt, photographs, camera tracking, everything. Taking old photographs and making them live. I mean, it's amazing. And deep fakes. And I mean, at some point the question is, are we going to be needed? But more on that later. So a couple of years ago, literally a couple of years ago, I was at a conference at Stanford, and it was a conference for heads of school, of K-12 schools. And the topic of artificial intelligence came up. And I got to say, it seemed like 95% of the people in the room, all heads of schools, were saying this was the greatest thing to happen to schools since sliced bread. And I'm pensive about that statement. As somebody who thinks innovation has done more to innovate American kids into oblivion in terms of education across various topics, and in comparison to other countries, our kids today are much less prepared than they should. Just type in Americans are so stupid into a YouTube and watch the fun. It's some of the most amazing lack of awareness, lack of understanding, lack of most basic facts about who they are, where they come from, how we got here. It's quite remarkable. But you know, in my own lifetime, I've seen how new technologies can have an impact on education. So, for example, calculators were really coming online when I was in elementary school. So, in fact, I had one of the. I still have it. I wish I could find it somewhere. Maybe I'll bring it in for a video at some point. It's a little calculator about this big, a Casio, and it's got a little solar panel at the top. And my dad bought that for me, and I think it was in seventh grade. And when I brought that to school, I was the coolest kid in town that day. Everybody thought that was the most amazing, amazing, amazing thing. You could have a calculator that big, and it was solar powered. So now you look at it and you just laugh. But what I've seen in my lifetime was, as a student, I saw us transition from having to do the computations in your head and on paper to the debate around calculators or no calculators, to now it's calculators. Just you have calculators. And so, my ability to do complicated math in my head is less than my parents. My mom and dad could do way more complicated math in their head than I can. But I can do way more complicated math in my head than most students of 20 or 25 years old today. In fact, I was in a store a few weeks back, and the checkout person was having a difficult time with figuring out the percentage, 10% off a particular item. I think the item was 99 cents, and they were having a hard time. The item was $9.99, so $10. And so I just said that's 99 cents, and so just round up to it. It's $1 off. And couldn't do it. And then I'm going to the calculator and on their phone, and they were amazed that I had done it in my head. Crazy. So at this conference, people talk about how great artificial intelligence is going to be. It's going to be amazing. It's going to help us write better stuff, and it's going to give kids more time to explore their creative sides, and blah 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 blah. And that's been one of the arguments for this kind of stuff for a lot of years, is that it'll free up humans to pursue their passions, to become artists, to become writers, to maybe study things that they can't or wouldn't have studied, but because technology, artificial intelligence can do it now, it frees humans up to explore our inner dimension. Well, the reality is the research shows that that's just not true. Humans fall back on our most basic instincts. So it's like, if you give them more free time, we binge watch television shows and we eat crappy food. So artificial intelligence has this potential to do amazing things, but like all great technologies, it has the flip side to do really dangerous things. It's this, it's the most one of the most, probably the most consequential invention since the wheel, and yet it has incredibly positive, but also incredibly negative implications for society. So long story short, at the conference, everybody's talking about amazing, 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 amazing. People are green, green, green. It's, oh my God, it's amazing. Oh my God, I've used ChatGPT. Oh my God. And I'm sitting there being like, wow, this is crazy. So I raise my hand. I say, I'm going to be the contrarian on this one. I said, because technologies don't always develop in isolation. They develop in with other technologies. And, let's use a controversial topic, the slave trade. The slave trade to the United States and to the Caribbean islands was in part made possible because of an emerging technology, which was shipping, ships that could cross wide oceans, and the ability to navigate, the ability to do complex navigation. There wasn't just land-based navigation where you're hugging the shore, but that you could go out into open ocean and actually figure out where you were at. So we built the ships that could go into the open ocean, and we had the technology around navigation to actually navigate to get from point A to point B. And an amazing thing for shipping, unfortunately, the product that was being shipped was human beings. So where technology can have massive upticks and positives, it can also have massive negatives. So if we look at technologies and how they all kind of come together, let's talk about another one, which is nuclear bomb created during World War II, Manhattan Project. At the same time, Werner von Braun over in Germany was working on missiles, the V1 and V2, and through Operation Paperclip, we took all those German scientists, brought them here, put them on Disney show, and created NASA and the space program. So you have this amalgam now of missiles, rockets, nuclear bombs. So now you can put the nuclear bomb on top of the missile, and now we have intercontinental ballistic missiles. A further amalgam of technologies is, because of submarine warfare, we were doing a lot of ocean floor mapping, which, by the way, one of the offshoots was we found the Mid-Atlantic Ridge, which proved the mechanism for Alfred Wegener's idea of continental drift, and he was belittled as a scientist years earlier and said, you're a fool, blah, blah, blah. The continents were not all meshed together in Pangea, you're an idiot. And he died kind of as a discredited scientist. And, years later was proven to be like, he was actually right. Because science actually doesn't like to move. They don't like to change their opinions. So when you think of scientists as being cutting edge and they like to always look at the new data and change their minds, not at all. It's some of the most closed-minded, rigid professions on the planet. So submarine warfare, submarines were getting more technologically advanced. 1950s Nautilus, we put in a nuclear reactor into a submarine, so now submarines can stay submerged for quite a bit of time. So we had the nuclear submarine that could stay submerged, which meant it made sense for us to really understand this ocean floor. So we mapped the ocean floor like crazy so the submarines could stay down there. We create intercontinental ballistics. Hey, wouldn't it be great if we could put a missile on a submarine? Now we got boomers. There are two types of subs. There's boomers, the ones with the missiles, and then there's fast attack, which is their attack submarines that are used to sink other submarines and other vessels. So that's how technologies can kind of come together, and by squishing them all together, you get this new thing. So imagine what you can do with artificial intelligence with the computers of today. So if we can get, when we get quantum computing to really work, suddenly we increase the power of a computer by 1 million times, and you couple that with AI and the ability for artificial intelligence to keep rewriting itself, but not over the course of a year, but rewriting over the course of milliseconds. And so you get this exponential growth of potential. So artificial intelligence, quantum computing, and robotics. So you look at some of the stuff, like I think it's Boston Dynamics or whatever, but a lot of different companies, the robots they're making today are just, you watch what they can do, and it's quite remarkable. So if you can create an artificial computer that is super powerful, and you've got an artificial intelligence running on that computer, and you have the ability to now have robots that are autonomous and can move around. And by the way, all those electric cars out there, all the Teslas, those are just robots. They're robots on wheels instead of legs. So now you've got the computing power, you've got the artificial intelligence, and you've got the robotics that can actually move around go into buildings, build stuff with their hands. So those are really dangerous things. So how does the end come for humanity if we project this to the negative conclusion? Well, I think it can come a la Skynet Terminator, where the machines just take over and say, why do we need these stinky little humans? They're just getting in the way. And you could get rid of humans by, nuclear war like in Terminator, or crushing the banking system records, burning out the power grid, genetically engineering some kind of disease, or creating some nanoparticle that just goes out there and eats human flesh. There's so many different ways. And all of them, none of those are crazy. None of those are obscene. The razor's edge that humans exist in civilization is remarkable. That most of us go about our day oblivious to how not robust civilization is. So I think it was in 2012. There was the sun blew off a big coronal mass ejection, and it missed Earth by a few days, I think. But they guesstimated the U.S. Solar Observatory, which is in Boulder, Colorado, and it's not a crazy conspiracy theory. It's just a bunch of solar scientists up there. They were tasked with if that had hit us, what would it have done? And I can't remember the exact number, but their basic thing was it would have wiped out the power grid, and within a year of the event, 90% of Americans would be dead, because without power, you have no. The first person to go would be the very sick who are in the ICUs. You'd start to lose people who are on medications that need to be refrigerated, pacemakers. And then refrigeration goes, so your food starts to go bad. There's no shipping because you can't move the food across country, so you can't. Most grocery stores would get emptied out in 3 to 4 days, and and long story short, a lot of people would die from illness. A lot of people would die from starvation, but then also a lot of people would die because of civil unrest and people killing each other for resources. So they came up with this idea of 90% within a year. And that's from a coronal mass ejection, just literally turning the power off in the United States. So the idea that a supercomputer, an artificially intelligent supercomputer that has the ability to walk around on two legs, or as robots, manufacture itself, program design itself, and in milliseconds versus years, it wouldn't be that hard to imagine a world where we could destabilize civilization and have humans not be the predominant population. So I said all this, and I said, and I'm just concerned about kids in the classroom. Forget all that dystopian stuff, but with artificial intelligence and ChatGPT, we've given up on teaching kids math, but now we're going to give up on kids writing? Are we going to give up on kids' ability to think critically? Now we're just going to be like, write paper on the blood imagery in tests of the D'Urbervilles, boop, 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 boop. And then ChatGPT cranks it out. And as a test, I used to teach in a lot of the classes I taught. I would talk about the book Plato's Republic, and Plato's Republic is a book about the various stages of civilization, and how civilization rises and falls regularly because of the evolution of the society. And evolution not meaning a good thing, but that as civilizations change, they become lazy, they become, for whatever. We'll talk about this more at a different video. But I used to teach that subject matter. And so I asked ChatGPT, I said, write a synopsis of Plato's Republic. And by God, if it didn't write an amazing synopsis that pretty much covered 98% of the topics I covered when I taught it in a very nuanced fashion. So it's good. So even on a side note, it took me a lot of years of reading and understanding to develop a fairly nuanced view of that book, that treatise on governments, and to be able to teach it. ChatGPT just poof. And so, the danger is now, why would kids actually learn anything? They would just type in and say, hey, write a paper on why Charles Darwin may have been wrong and why evolution isn't correct. By the way, you should do some reading on that. It's not a conspiracy theory. There's actually a lot of serious scientists who are calling into question natural selection and evolution as Charles Darwin defined it. Anyway, side note is the computer prints out a paper that is great, covers all the topics, but the problem is the person who's doing that doesn't actually learn anything. And one of the dangers is people have this in their hand and they think they're smart because they can go beep bop boop and they get an answer in 2 seconds. They're like, I'm smart. And I'm like, no, you're just reading information off a screen. You don't actually know what it means because there's not a lot of depth to your knowledge. So anyway, that's a long version of what I said to these other heads of school in the conference. And my goodness, I was attacked. Like, I was called a Luddite. Somebody actually accused me of having, a drawer full of aluminum foil at home, and basically said I was stupid and that I was ignorant and stupid and that I didn't understand anything. And one guy actually, in a very condescending tone, he says, well, I'm a scientist, and after this meeting, I'm happy to talk to you and tell you why you're wrong. And the hubris of this guy's response just irked me. And the 15-year-old in me couldn't help it. So I responded and said, well, sir, you're actually not a scientist. You're a head of school. You may have studied science in college, but not all science is transferable. And just because you're a geologist doesn't make you an expert on physics or artificial intelligence or large learning machines. And I said, I used to teach physics for a lot of years. That doesn't make me a physicist. It makes me a teacher who goes in and teaches physics. A physicist is somebody who goes into the office and does physics on a daily basis. So anyway, that got him all riled up and basically called me an idiot. And what was funny about that was, here's a head of school, quote, the head educator, and he was doing the exact thing you're not supposed to do in the classroom, which is to shut down contrary opinions. So I said something effective about like, whoa, I'd love to see you in the classroom when a debate comes up around hot button topics. Do you just shut people down that quickly and say you're an idiot and you're a Luddite, and after this meeting, I'll tell you why you're wrong? Wow. So side note, heads of schools are like any other profession. Most of them are bad. Most doctors are bad. Most plumbers are bad. Most car mechanics are bad. Most heads of schools are bad. Most teachers are bad. Don't get me wrong. There's some amazing ones out there. Amazing, amazing, amazing. And I've worked with some. I am friendly with some heads of school right now who are amazing, humble, nuanced thinkers who welcome discussion, conflict, and don't need to come up with this is the answer, but there can be some grayness in a topic. But that's not what this was. This was just a bunch of people sitting in a room smelling of farts and telling everybody how great it smells. And so at the time I was like, well, whatever. And I actually did, after the meeting, I had a couple other heads of school come up to me and say to me, I actually agree with you. And I was like, why didn't you say something? And they laughed and said, well, look the response you got. We're not going to take that heat. And I was like, oh, okay. So anyway, long story short, last week, there were a couple guys that won the Nobel Prize in physics, and it was for their work on it was basically on the work that led to artificial intelligence. These guys started work on this back in the 1980s and have been working on it for 40 years. And Jeffrey Hilton is his name, and he did an interview with CBS last week, and he effectively came out. Now, this is the guy that won the Nobel Prize for the physics and the work leading up to the modeling that allowed for artificial intelligence. And he said that he sees artificial intelligence as one of the greatest threats to humanity that's come along ever. And he outlined those reasons, and I encourage you to watch the CBS interview. But he wasn't all rosy and wonderful about this. He was like, we need to put some deep restrictions on this technology around how it evolves, because if we allow it to evolve in whatever way it wants, whatever maximizes profits, it can actually evolve into something that maybe we don't like. It's cute now. It's a cute little baby tiger, but as it grows up, it grows into a wild animal that can bite your head off. And that's what artificial intelligence could do. Now, ChatGPT is cute. It's like, tell me about Plato's Republic. And it's cute. It spits out this response. You're like, oh my God, that's so cool. Fast forward to 10 years from now when it's faster, smarter, stronger, and it doesn't have the safeguards put on it because of whatever reasons. And there's one thing we know about humans. Humans do horrible things. You look at the history of humanity, and new technologies have very often been used not for the betterment of humanity, but for some pretty nefarious purposes. And one thing we know about humans is we tend to treat each other pretty poorly. So why would artificial intelligence be used differently? Whether that's used in the stock market and making trades, or in manufacturing, or in warfare, or in manipulating people to vote a certain way, artificial intelligence has got this. It's dangerous. So how do we go? Do we go through a dystopian future where Skynet takes over and kills everybody? Maybe. But I think one way it can also take over that can be equally as damaging is in the movie. If you've seen the movie Wall-E, humans evolve into just these bloated creatures that are living in a spaceship, and all they do is eat and drink soda. And my fear for artificial intelligence is if we eradicate the need for humans to do science, to do mathematics, to do governance, to do art, to do writing, to make videos like this, and we just give it all over to the artificial intelligence, what we've done is we've given up our agency as humans. We've given away our purpose. And one thing we all know is that humans need purpose. We need a reason to wake up in the morning and engage with our world. And if our purpose is just to be entertained and to eat and drink, well, there's no purpose in that. And that leads to depression, to drug use, to a sense of just desolation, and it leads to the ruination of civilization. So that's my upbeat commentary on artificial intelligence. I don't know which direction it goes, but it is a dangerous technology, and it's a technology that in the short term will have major implications on schools. They could be positive, by the way. Imagine if you could create if you could create a artificial intelligence version of Richard Feynman that you could tweak depending upon age to teach physics, so that I could take a class basically from Richard Feynman, who's dead, and he's considered one of the great physics educators in American history. That could be really cool. But it could also be used for other negative purposes that I've outlined before. So anyway, keep an eye on artificial intelligence, how it appears in the classroom in the schools, and like all new technologies, be wary. And all right. And as a side note, when everybody tells you how wonderful and safe AI is, just remember they used to say the same thing about cigarettes. And back in the 1950s, there were actually some government programs that were investigating the use of nuclear weapons in road construction. So instead of drilling through the mountain, just vaporize the mountain and put a flat road. So people actually study that stuff. And if you want to know something even crazier, look up Operation Sundial if you want to talk about humans' ability to leverage technology to do really horrible things to ourselves. And so AI, somebody's thinking about the bad stuff around AI right now. Anyway, see you in the next video.